Maybe go like that. Then looks like we are live.
All right.
What?
All right. So, how about that Putin?
Putin?
Yeah. How about that Putin?
Yeah, he just had a interview with Tucker Carlson, didn't he?
Yeah, with the Tucker.
With the Tucker.
With the Tucker.
I didn't see how that went. Have you seen it?
I saw pieces of it, parts, highlights. I believe is the term that the kids use today.
What was some highlights? Fill me in.
Oh shoot! It was just earlier today. He was talking about. He was asking him, would consider like releasing somebody who's holding somebody, like a journalist. I didn't catch the name.
Okay.
Would he consider releasing him? Was the question. He said he would. He said they're in talks.
Okay.
But America's going to have to make a deal. So that's what he said. And then he said something about would he negotiate with Ukraine or something, or whatever, with the UN, something like that. And he was like, he's very political. He's very what do you call it? Sly with his words, and
right.
So he's not giving anything away, so to speak.
Oh man!
But basically, he just suggested they were in talks, and people are going to have to come to the table and make a good offer. I guess I don't know.
Okay.
But he was politically vague,
Gotcha.
Which
okay.
is smart in his position, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But Tucker was asking him some pretty straightforward questions, not in a aggressive way, but just not asking him run-of-the-mill, just easy questions. But those were the couple highlights I remember. So very interesting, very, very interesting.
Gotcha.
But I guess he's catching a lot of flack for doing that. I don't know.
Really?
Yeah, I guess so.
I mean, I think it's pretty cool. Whoa.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I really am not sure. It's like, well, America's painted him as the villain.
Okay.
And Tucker's saying we should hear him out. And then it's like, well, we're not sure.
Okay.
Nobody's quite sure, right, who they should be listening to.
Okay.
Because we shouldn't trust the media, but the media is saying Ukraine is right.
Right. Yeah.
And I like from the beginning, I understood that the media wants me to be for Ukraine. It's not that I'm against Ukraine.
Right.
But I do have reservations about just listening to them.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm like, well, what if? I mean, they're always lying. So if everything they say is a lie or self-interest, then I'm like, well, what's the? It's not that I believe Putin,
right,
or Russia,
right.
They haven't historically been the allies of freedom. But at the same time, I'm not sure how much in modern day, in the 20th century, America's been the ally of freedom either. Certainly more so. It's not the same as what Russia did and other communist countries and such like that. But historically, but we're living in a very confusing time full of disinformation and lack of trust for really anything. So it's like, well, if media says Putin's bad guy, but I know he's invading Ukraine, I can't say Putin's good guy with a clear conscience, so to speak. But so Tucker is like, well, we should hear what he has to say, and I'm like, well, that's not bad. But if someone did that to Hitler, which they did,
right?
Not in the same way, but people did give Hitler, they so it's like, well, historically we know Hitler was wrong, but at the time people didn't fully understand.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, some people gave him a voice, and they were, or not a voice, but gave him the benefit of the doubt, which was wrong at the time, as appeasement. And we look at that as a bad example of foreign policy. We do not appease bad rulers or dictators, right?
Right.
We don't appease them. We can't, because if you do, you get like taking over the whole continent type. Exterminating populations and all that kind of stuff. But so anyway, it's a toss-up. I'm not against him interviewing Putin at all. I would never give him flack personally for it. I don't really care that much. But I guess it's a hot button issue as far as the media is concerned. Because, like I said, they want everyone to believe he is the bad guy without any. That's it. That's the end of the story.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of silly. I think it makes sense to hear Putin out.
Right.
I think that adds up to me. Well, I'd like to know what he's saying.
Right. His arguments.
Yeah.
His justifications. His answers to these questions. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because, I mean, I don't know. I feel like in this scenario, what's the harm in me hearing his side?
Right. Right.
But maybe, I guess I could be wrong on that, but I don't necessarily see that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see it as such a. It's definitely not as big of a deal as what people are making it out to be. Because if you make too big of a deal about it, it feels like censorship, which the conservative right is very sensitive to. And if you try to censor it, well, then people are just going to listen because you don't want them to listen.
Right. Yeah.
And they're right to do so, because that's not what America is built on. And so it's like, well, essentially you're right for not listening to people who want to censor you. That's correct. That's the correct stance,
right?
For an American to take, or a traditional American to take, because you're supposed to resist authoritarian, like breaches of freedom or authorities that try to restrict your constitutional freedoms and all that stuff. So it's definitely, I think it's crazy to say it's bad, but you do want to be careful. But then again, it's like the media lies about everything,
right?
And why do they need me to? Why do they need me to support Ukraine?
I don't know.
If the public supports Ukraine, we send all this money to Ukraine, and then all that money gets funneled into the political left and to corrupt Ukrainian officials, which before the invasion is the most corrupt country on earth per leader, right?
Ooh.
And then afterward we send them billions and billions of dollars. So it's like,
right.
And then apparently there's so much controversy over Ukraine's leader because the media made him out to be a saint at first.
Right, Zelensky.
And a lot of people bought it. I didn't have any other, but then once the cross-examination comes, the other information, he was a stand-up comedian who is Russian. And now he's the president of Ukraine. It's like, okay, well, and then he's very controversial even in his own country. You know what I'm saying? I'm like,
right.
It's not looking super clear on. We can say invasion's wrong. We can say war is senseless for no reason.
Right.
We can say
absolutely.
But we don't. I think the average person can't possibly know for sure what's going on. Without some kind of inside knowledge. I mean, we just can't. I think it's not obvious. It's not going to be obvious.
Right.
The extent that some of these things are crooked. I think it's just, but we can, we can use our senses,
right,
and we should use our faculties, but I think coming to clear conclusions is going to be much more difficult because of the breadth of corruption and also the breadth of misinformation. You know?
Right.
It's like, but that's where they want us. They want us informationally demoralized to where we can't recognize correct information when it's given to us.
Mm.
And which is a mechanism used by communists and things to demoralize the population. And they've been doing that to us for years, to the extent that other countries don't even understand why. They don't even get it. But it's because they haven't been subjected to the propaganda campaigns for so long, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, Putin.
Good old Putin.
Do you say Putin?
Putin.
I like to say Putin.
Putin?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That reminds me of like Rasputin.
Yeah.
And that's pretty good.
Putin.
Rasputin.
I think that's
my favorite Russian.
Oh yeah,
Rasputin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Dude, the story.
Technicality faculty.
There we go. Are we back?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, we're back. We're back.
Welcome.
Okay, well,
Welcome.
I was just saying, Rasputin is my favorite. He's one of my favorite Russians of all time.
Wow.
Yeah, he's up there on the list. Have you heard like the stories of Rasputin?
No.
No?
No, enlighten me.
He's like, Rasputin's like a warlock, basically.
Oh.
Like during like I want to say early 1900s, but it could have been like late 1800s.
Is that the Anastasia guy?
Yeah, it's the Anastasia guy, but he's real.
Cartoon? Oh, but he's real.
Yeah, Rasputin's real.
Okay.
And he was like,
wow.
He was like a sorcerer of some sort.
Wow.
And he was really close to someone. I want to say like
royal family.
Yeah, like a royal family
before the revolution.
Yeah.
We'll get into.
Okay. Yeah. But he has like these crazy stories of he's trying to usurp authority and position by like manipulating women and all this stuff, and he's kind of like an occultic leader, and they eventually, like a lot of people in Russia are like, we gotta stop this guy. He's kind of a monster.
Wow.
And so they're trying to find ways to kill him, and they can't kill him.
Wow.
And so there's like stories of him drinking whole bottles of poison.
Wow.
And it just doesn't work. Him getting shot, and he comes back the next day, and it's just the
He's like,
we have to, huh?
He's your favorite.
He's one of my favorites. He's one of my favorites.
You love Satanists. You love Satanists.
That's not what I'm saying. Okay.
That sounds exactly like I don't know how to interpret it any other way.
It's just a ridiculous story, okay?
I go. I'm following.
He's my favorite in that it's just outrageous what is going on with Rasputin. It's not. I'm not like looking up to Rasputin. Listen, no, okay?
No, tell me more.
Just like, tell me more. He was a great guy.
Yeah.
You know, make Russia great again.
Yeah. Make Russia a Satanist again.
Dude, he was a Satanist.
Wow.
He had to have been. He was super mystic.
Wow.
But there's just crazy stories about trying to kill him and how he was like, he was just slimy, dirty character trying to get in to take over Russia, basically.
and the people trying to kill him. No wonder the revolution happened the way it did.
Well, he was actually like really smooth.
Right.
And so like he's supposed to be like a renowned like ladies man. Okay. He's really like a cult leader, is what he is.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, that's why I like him so much.
There we go.
Just, there's something about cult leaders.
I'm glad we can get to the bottom of it.
There's something, you just feel their draw.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something to it.
You get sucked in with their charm. Yeah, well,
there's something to it, man.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying, okay? He's not my favorite, but he's up there.
Yeah.
He's up there,
Wow.
Oh my gosh. There's also Waco. speaking of cult leaders, dude, that guy, holy cow. Yeah. He had people convinced he was like the second coming of Christ. That he was Christ.
Wow.
It was insane.
Oh my gosh.
That was pretty wild.
All that whole thing was messed up.
Yeah, the ATF.
So messed up.
That was stupid. They were being dumb.
Yeah, that was such a breach of, well, personal freedom. Not that I'm for cult leaders, but like,
no,
that was messed up.
It's so bad on both sides.
Yeah.
And so like the ATF are just acting like monsters, and then you have this cult leader, and then who's
it's Bill Clinton's regime.
Yeah. But this cult leader who's like the people underneath this cult leader, they're just people.
They're just people.
They're like, you know, they're convinced of something.
They're susceptible, yeah.
That's not true, but they're just people. And to see how all that went down, oh my gosh, I watched a couple documentaries on it.
I think my parents and grandparents. Well, I don't remember when it was in the 90s, right? It happened when I was a kid. I think it happened when I was
I think it was 93.
Oh, okay.
I think it was 1993.
Okay, that's a little early. I was not. Pretty. We were young.
yeah. I think it was the year. Yeah.
So 93. Yeah, I remember my parents and grandparents. Whenever I got older, they would mention it, and it was always like it's kind of a sore, like a stain on whatever. It just reflected very, very badly on the authorities, you know.
I mean, yeah.
Because they were like, well, was it wrong? Of course. But they didn't deserve to be shot and burned to death.
No.
Or whatever, you know.
Yeah. And they're still, like, questioning. Like, they don't know.
Yeah.
Like, because it all ends in this huge fire.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And both sides say it's the other people.
Yeah.
Who started the fire.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, that's confusing.
Yep.
And whenever you got like a cult, not an a cult, but a cult of people who are believing that this is the end times.
Yeah.
And it's like, are they susceptible to start a fire?
Right.
And just burn it all down?
Maybe.
Yeah, they are susceptible to that. But could it be the ATF as well? Who just
tried to smoke them out,
and then something caught on fire, or maybe they intentionally wanted a huge fire. Maybe they were just dumb.
Yeah.
And so they just burned it all to the ground. You know, could have been by accident, could have been on purpose.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is just a flub up. But it's a mess on both sides.
Yes,
you know, you don't really side with the Waconians, because you're like, you guys are bewitched.
Right. But it's like, was the response appropriate? It's like, well, I think in general,
completely not.
I think in general, no.
No, it's terrifying.
Completely inappropriate.
Terrifying to see what the ATF would do. They brought in tanks.
Yeah.
You know, it's
scary, dude. That was such a if you think about the way our government was formed, that's a huge breach.
Mm-hmm.
For not being charged with a crime. You're bringing in tanks, forcing your way onto it. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Dude, if they're gonna resist you, you can have a standoff. You can arrest them when they come out, I guess. But like, that was so bad. I mean,
yeah, that was crazy. That was
even if you formally declare them a terrorist organization, you know what I'm saying? It's like, well, then that response might be warranted. But that's if they're actually plotting against the public,
right? Then that would make sense.
Then it's like, okay, well, we need to stop this immediately, and then you force your way in, I guess. But short of that, they weren't a threat to the public.
Right? No,
they're not planning. They're planning to defend themselves from the government.
Yes. Yeah. And then the government shows up.
And then the government shows up in that kind of force.
Yeah.
Like, well, they essentially proved themselves, or the government proved them right.
They did.
And I think the country was like, oh shoot, that's not. We don't agree with cults, but like that doesn't seem.
Yeah, just because we don't agree with cults doesn't mean you get to
murder them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whole families,
you know.
Yeah.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Messed up, dude.
Mm-mm.
But but that was, public blunder. But there's lots of stuff like that privately, or like on the down low that, but again, so much, there's so many different types of information, but there's a lot of stuff like that, I'm sure, that have happened that they just keep it out of the public eye.
Right.
It's pretty easy when you own the media to the extent, when they work for you.
It's true, yeah.
It's pretty easy to do, which, yeah. But shoot, Rasputin is a cult leader. Waco happened.
Yeah.
Welcome to Earth.
Welcome. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Just a couple paper bags trying to make our way in life.
Mm-hmm.
We think as deeply as our faculties will allow,
As our faculties will allow, as a bag.
To establish a consistent narrative of this place is ridiculous on incomplete information. What are we supposed to do? What is our bag to do?
That's funny.
We jump to conclusions. Same thing everyone else does.
Yes! Yes! Dude, I'm jumping. I'm jumping, dude.
The jump.
I'm jumping. Holy cow.
Don't like capitalism? Communism! Don't like religion? Cult! Join a cult. It doesn't matter what it is. An intellectual cult?
An intellectual cult?
Join it. An
academic
cult? Join it.
Let's just call it.
Pseudo-spiritual? Yeah. He's using the faculties. No,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. But, yep. Yeah, we jump to conclusions just like everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we are.
And we make lists of our favorite cult leaders.
I guess we do.
Rasputin's up there. Rasputin, he's up there.
Putin's number 2.
I don't remember who the Waco guy was.
Oh, I don't know, yeah.
But...
yeah, I don't know.
I might put him low.
Yeah.
List of cult leaders.
Yeah.
It's probably like Rasputin, and then Kim Jong-un, and then...
Kim Jong-song, Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un. But they have to be at the top.
Yeah.
If you don't put them at the top...
it's a big issue.
You know what I'm saying? You gotta...
Yeah, no, they're very much at the top. Maybe...
Emperor Hirohito, number 4.
Number 4.
Hey, be nice.
My bad. I forgot he's one of my favorites. Maybe underneath Rasputin.
Maybe. And then you have FDR, number 5.
FDR? You have FDR? Oh my gosh. Hey. Yeah, FDR is my 5th favorite cult leader.
My 5th favorite cult leader.
Yeah, he's really... I'm just very impressed.
Yeah, very impressed at what he was able to accomplish in 4 terms.
Yeah.
Winning 4 terms back to back.
Absolutely.
Love that.
Just great.
He did serve 4 terms, but he did win 4 terms.
He what?
He won 4 terms.
What are you talking about? You get 2 terms.
Yeah, now. Because of him.
Oh!
He won 3 terms.
It's been a long time since history class. But you're right.
He served 3 terms full, and then he passed away he won his 4th term and passed away. I believe. That's last I checked.
Last you checked.
And people were like, that's too long, that's too much. 2 terms.
When was that?
But
what years is what years
30s and 40s.
This is in the 30s and 40s we established a 2-term.
Well, after so Harry Truman took over.
Okay.
So FDR was a Democrat. Harry Truman was a Republican. Back then, it was very common to do cross-party running mates.
Okay. Yeah.
To get more support, steal votes from the other person.
Right.
So Harry Truman finished World War II.
Mm-hmm.
He approved the atomic bomb to be dropped.
Mm-hmm.
And he approved the targets. Right. FDR was kind of losing it. Losing his mental faculties. He was very old.
Right.
But he served 12 years.
So FDR is the president who gets sick and dies in the middle of World War II.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And then Truman takes over.
And Truman takes over, finishes the war.
Yeah.
And then they establish a 2-term. They pass the law. The presidents can only serve 2 terms. But before that, it was tradition. Oh. It wasn't a law. It was tradition to resign after 2 terms.
I got
to not run again. Now, I don't know that everybody. I think some people did run. They just didn't win.
Okay.
I'm not sure about that. But George Washington served 2 back-to-back terms, and he said that's enough.
Oh, okay.
And so that's enough. I'm gonna resign. I'm gonna let the next generation,
Right.
And because he did that, that was tradition. Everybody kind of did that. It's like I've been successful 2 terms. You're successful. Step down. But FDR broke that tradition.
Wow.
Won a 3rd term, ran again, won a 4th term, and then passed away.
I don't think I knew it was that recent, but I had totally forgotten that we established that later on. I've been thinking it's been around for a long time.
No.
That's crazy.
Well, I guess
in tradition,
80 years.
In tradition, it seems like it lasted, but that's pretty cool.
Right.
That a tradition like that lasted as long as it did.
For sure. And they just codified it into law, which is appropriate. I mean, that's fine, I guess.
Yeah. We began to lose honor.
Yeah. Well, we began to lose sense. We lost something.
Something got lost, so we had to put it in law.
Deteriorated,
Golly, dude.
So, but it's like 8 years. Doesn't really matter that much if it's back-to-back failed leaders, or people who just compound the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's the unintended consequence of having term limits is everyone who gets elected knows, hey, I'm not going to be here forever. And it almost, I'm not saying it does make you more reckless, but it almost is an unintended consequence of that. It's like, oh, well, I only have 2 terms, so... what do I care?
Right.
But it's like, well, that's never how previous leaders thought. They never thought that because they could, they could run more, but they just didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of unintended consequences, which is why, me personally, they talk about term limits for Congress and the Senate, and I'm like, well, I'm not overtly against that. However, if I'm a crooked dude and I'm running for Congress or I'm running for Senate and I have a limit, it's almost like I'm going to be more reckless than if I can do it. And it's like, it's a moot point because corruption's corruption.
Right.
8 years of corruption, 6 years of corruption, 12 years of corruption, 40 years of corruption. It's, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. It's a moot point. So that's why I'm not for or against. I don't really care that much. But what we want to avoid is 40-year corrupt politicians who never lose, who can't lose. Because once you're in office for 40 years, I mean, you're going to keep winning your districts. You're going to keep winning your state. You're going to keep winning. And most of the time, these districts are very small in landmass. They can be very large in population, but they can be very small. And so it's like, I don't know, how are you supposed to lose if you've been the incumbent for 30 years? Nancy Pelosi is a great example of a detriment to our government as a whole, but she will never lose. She'll just never lose. If she wins, if she runs, she wins. And it's like, well, what do you do? Term limits? It's like, okay, I guess that's better, but it's just hard to say because the people you get in there are going to be, well, you're depending on the people being higher quality, and if they aren't, their time is limited.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, well, then it's a numbers game. We're going to have more people, but we all know that most people are going to be equally corrupt, no matter new faces, old faces, right?
Yeah, that's how it feels right now. It's just, it doesn't matter.
The majority of people are corrupt, so when you find a person who's not corrupt, they are in the strong minority, vast minority, so we're going to limit their terms.
Right, yeah.
And so it's like, well, I'm not, that's difficult.
Yeah.
And so the real problem is not terms, it's the lack of enforcement. We do have laws against, well, I mean, we do have some anti-corruption laws, but at the same time, we don't enforce them. And people don't get investigated. They pay off the authorities, and they own the authorities. So, well, you don't have to pay off the authorities when you appoint them to their jobs, you know?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, what are they going to do? You're going to appoint them, and literally the only deal is that they don't investigate you. You know?
Yeah.
Just implied. You don't make the deal. It's just implied in the you know. But anyway, so term limits aren't actually going to help fix anything. What will do it is enforcement. And some countries, well, some not countries, because but some leaders have a really good policy. I think Singapore is a great example of and I'm not sure, but I've heard this, where basically they said we got rid of corruption because as soon as one of the leaders took a vacation from a lobbyist or something, they arrested him. And he said, no more corruption. And I'm like, you just arrested the leader because he wasn't asking for anything. He took a benefit, a financial benefit, like an all-expense paid vacation.
Right.
You arrested him, charged him with corruption, and threw him in jail. Who? If you can arrest him like that, then who's going to do that under him?
Yeah.
And it's not a political. Yeah. It's not a political move to remove your political opponent from office. It's like he actually did, and it's like, well, if you do that, why? The congressman's not going to get away with it. The senator's not going to get away with it. The parliamentarian's not going to get away. It's like whatever form of government you have, the lesser representatives are going to be. They're like, oh no, don't.
Right.
You fixed it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you fixed it like fast. You know what I mean? It's like, well, but the problem essentially is a complete lack of enforcement or accountability. For certain people who play the game, so to speak. But term limits won't fix that. It's the same thing with the president, but it's like I always get bummed out because if you have a good president, well, he's only got 2 terms. It's such a bummer. Such a bummer. To me, I'm like, I love good leaders. It's like they only come around once in a lifetime, and you only got 8 years. Yeah, well, that means that like you're doomed 30, 40 years of a bad president.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, doesn't make me warm and fuzzy inside,
Right.
Doesn't make me sleep better,
Like that's even how I've been thinking about some of the Republican Party.
Yes.
Because I'm down with what they're standing for. Yeah. For the most part, but I'm like, I think a lot of them just play the game.
Yes.
And I think that's just the political way.
Yeah.
I'm just I'm in here, so I got to give some to the Democrats. I got to give some to these people. Got to give some to these people, and I don't really care, you know. So I was elected by the Republicans, so I have to say what I have to say to remain in their good graces. But I'm a politician, and I'm here playing this game. That's always really bothered me. I think because I'm like, so you don't really stand for anything other than the system.
Yes.
The system that they have in place, whatever's going on, behind closed doors, they're willing to stand up for that system, but not for any actual beliefs. Yeah.
Well, we do have people in the party that do that now, but it just, like I said, they're in the minority on either side, but it's just there's not very many.
Yeah, it's so few of them.
Yeah.
But the majority of them, you're like, well...
Yeah, they play...
what's your plan here? Yeah. They just wanted to be politicians, and now they're politicians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And power attracts the worst types of people.
Right.
And so because for a good person to be an authority is a sacrifice. It's a public public servant.
Right.
But for a narcissistic individual or a toxic individual, they're attracted to positions of authority, attracted to positions of power, and they love it. They thrive in it. And they get all the perks and the bonuses and the self. They can act in their own self-interest, and they can They can act out at their political enemies or whatever the case.
Just like
may be.
Rasputin.
Yeah, just like
they're just a bunch of Rasputins. Yeah, that's wow.
But yeah, well, there probably are some Rasputins in there that can't die.
Yeah, probably.
But yeah, it's just like, well, and it's at every level of government attracts narcissists in our society, every level, and the volume of psychopaths and narcissists in positions of power is, well, I think it's underestimated.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think.
Why do you think we're seeing so much narcissism in the world? Like, has there always been this much narcissism, or do you think there were times where it was lesser? I feel like we see it all the time. I feel like I can walk down the street and probably 1 out of 7 people, I'm like, dude, the narcissistic traits are just right in your face.
Yeah, right in your face.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. You know, I've only been alive so many decades, so it's,
okay. So you.
If I study generation, yeah. Well, I don't know. No,
but you haven't been around for 300 years to really flush out this.
If I study generations, then you see patterns.
Okay.
And so in America, every country is different because every country, well, they have different leaders. Leaders matter. Leaders represent the people. And leaders matter, and you have different parental practices, different parental culture or family cultures. Okay. If the family culture is strong, you have very low narcissism. If the family, when the family culture fails, you have extreme polarities in every personality disorder, but specific narcissism, BPD, psychopathy. When the family unit, the family culture fails a nation. Everything else will fail soon.
Wow.
But it starts with that. So basically, in America, this is what I see when I study the generations, generational patterns. I can only go back so far because but what I see is that you have boomers, right? Baby boomers, who grew up after the war. Some of them were born during the Depression, but most of them during or after the war, and what happened there was they were kind of the focus. So most of the young males were like afforded the best of the land, the best jobs, the best opportunities, and what that created was a materialistic narcissism in the young men. Okay. And so of course the women are going to get the sour end of that deal, and that's what society now complains about. It's no longer real. So it's crazy because they're treating us young men like we're like them. Right. And like we didn't live off the fat of the land. We can't afford homes. Right. We didn't I didn't get cush careers with cush retirements. I have nothing. I have no career. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, that's your fault. No. Okay. That's a different debate. Okay. So,
it's our fault, but we're the ones with bags on our heads.
Yeah. I'm wearing a bag. Okay.
You know what? I'm wearing a bag. Yeah. So you can point your fingers all you want.
Yeah. It's like you didn't have to wear a bag. You know, you were the sunlight in the morning to your parents, right? But but anyway, so no hate to baby boomers. I'm not one of those people who disrespects elders. You know, I do appreciate elders, even if I don't agree with them, or even if they don't understand my struggles. I've always been very respectful to elders.
Right.
So I'm not hating on baby boomers, but I do study some of these things. And so it's like, well, they got the fat of the land. They got the best of everything. And I'm not mad at them for that. But the gate kept it.
Right.
It's true. It's true. I mean, they own 5 houses. I can't own 1. You know, and it's like, well, something, and it's not just me, because we're millennials, right? It's not just us. It's our parents, too.
Right.
Gen Xers got the sour end of the deal. And they were treated really badly by their boomer parents. Now, here's what I see, and I don't think everyone's going to agree with this, but this is my objective opinion. Whenever I look back, I see baby boomer men thriving in narcissistic traits, materialistic, self-important, and they're high achievers. Like they're not they're not without talent. They're not without merit. Like, I'm not saying that. You know, they're hard workers, but they kind of sold their souls to things. They got all the stuff they wanted. Everything you could ever want, they have it. They got big families, big houses, nice jobs, fulfilling jobs too. Like, I mean, I'm so jealous when I see like these older guys. They're retired from like government jobs. I'm like, dude, I can't even imagine making $50,000 a year, let alone 250. You know what I mean? And then anyway, just benefit after benefit just rolled upon them. I mean, and young too, in their 20s, they had houses, they had families. Yeah. But anyway, so then you go to Gen X. Gen X struggles really, really hard because they're treated. You know, Gen X men were treated really, really badly by their narcissistic fathers. So Gen X. So and I don't know that it's it's not always that clear. There's lots of exceptions, but the stereotype I grew up in was that dad's abusive always, mom's always right, mom's the saint, mom's a goddess, mom's an angel, dad's wrong. He's just wrong. He's men are stupid, men are corrupt, men are liars, all this stuff, right? And I'm like, and everyone has a father wound, and that's all anyone over the age. When I was a kid, anybody in their 20s and 30s, everyone hates dad. Nobody gets along with dad. Society hates dad. The courts hate. You know, it's like everybody. And so when I was growing up as a millennial, I'm like treated like an abusive man, even though I'm a kid.
Right. Yep.
And boomers are looking at me complaining about their lives, and then Gen Xers are mad at everybody. And I don't blame them. You know, I no hate to Gen Xers either. You know, they're my elders too, and so I respect them because of what they had to go through. They had to struggle, whereas boomers didn't. Boomers didn't struggle to get the benefits and the jobs. You know, Gen Xers had to like constantly prove their worth, right? But something so interesting happens. As the boomer men became narcissistic, they overwhelmingly, now this isn't everyone, it's not universal, but there are plenty of exceptions, overwhelmingly babied their daughters, overwhelmingly preferred their girls, like treated their sons with so much contempt. And I can't even like how many boomers, like when I'm holding one of my kids, how many boomers come up to me, complain about boys, and like promote, oh man, like you got daughters, good, boys are useless. And I'm like, golly. I'm like, it hurts me because I was treated like that. Right. It hurts, like personally it's very triggering. But I'm like, how dare you think that way? Like, I had a guy literally tell me that in a church. I'm holding my little girl, and I'm like, he's like, oh, you got a little girl, good, boys are useless. I'm like,
oh my gosh. Someone told you that in church?
Told me that.
What are you talking about?
That's the first thing they said.
Holy cow.
Oh, yeah, little girl, good, boys are useless. I'm like, you're psycho. You're effing psycho.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And I found out later, my family knew this guy. He has 2 sons and a girl. I'm like, I wonder who's the favorite in that home.
Yeah.
You hate your sons. I bet your sons don't like you because you treated them. Because you're telling me that.
Yeah,
I bet your sons. I bet you treated your sons bad. I bet they don't like you, and I wouldn't either if I were your son. You know,
right?
I didn't have anything against the dude, but that was such a rude thing to say.
Oh yeah,
and I've had other boomers come up to me like, "Oh yeah, I bet she runs the house," and I'm like, "I'm the adult." Like, do you think I'm stupid?
That's so funny.
Do you think I'm stupid?
But it happens.
Why would I let my toddler daughter run my house? I'm the parent.
It is crazy that it happens, though.
Yeah, well, I know
actually that their little girls run the house
and give them everything they want.
Absolutely.
I'm like, I have the faculties of an adult, of an adult bag.
Yeah, you're an adult bag.
I'm the adult bag. That's a toddler bag.
That's a toddler bag.
My toddler bag does not make all the bag decisions of the bag house.
That's
you know
right.
What I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm like, why would any reasonable adult talk like that? And project that on me? Because like I was raised, boys were bad, all these negative things.
Right.
And I'm like, none of it was true.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't treat people like that. My dad didn't treat people like that. You know, and I'm like, why do all these people believe this and teach it to me as if I'm going to turn out like that? And I'm like,
right.
That's ridiculous. First of all, it's not, well, it's extreme projection.
Right.
But then I just figured that people who just aren't smart enough, that they just project their own experience on everyone. And I'm like, well, I'm objective enough not to do that, which is why I leave room for exceptions.
Right.
You know, I leave plenty. But what I noticed was that boomers overwhelmingly punish their sons, hold their sons in contempt, like narcissistic fathers treat their sons badly, and they might treat all their kids badly, but they're overwhelmingly preferring the oldest daughter. And then, okay, the oldest daughter, they're reproducing themselves in the oldest daughter. And it could be both daughters, it could be all their daughters, I don't know. You know, it's not always so cut and so clear. But overwhelmingly, I see boomers put their sons down, like way down, and then promote their girls. And like they're infallible, like everything they are, like their vain, inflated egos, they give that to their girls. And then the girls grow up, Gen X women, which is and no hate, I'm not hating on anybody, the Karen generation.
Yeah.
You know, it's the Karen and Richard dynamic. It's like, well, Richard just does what he's told because that's how Gen X men were raised. But individually, they have to fight for a form of masculinity and power. But publicly, they are stripped of it completely. Which is why you see, not to be, I'm not insulting anybody, but you see this like tough guy facade in the Gen Xers, like personal accountability is everything, and it's like they have no authority in their house.
Right.
They have no power in any public or family setting at all because they've been completely stripped of it.
Yeah.
So their only recourse is to be accomplished as accomplished and strong as they can because those elements were still important back then.
Right. Yeah.
But you can't. But your wife is always right.
Yeah.
So I mean, well, that strips you of any real masculine authority in the home, which is essential, even biblically. It's essential, and people will say that, but they don't mean it because once the man puts his foot down in the home, he's controlling and abusive and wrong.
Right.
And it's like, well, okay, so the woman's always right, but it's the man's job to run the house. That's inherently backwards, and I'm going to trust what the Bible says over what bitter individuals with bad experiences say.
Right.
Because the Bible always proves itself true in my own life, and you know what I'm saying. So anyway, it's like. We were raised, so then fast forward to millennials and Gen Z, it's like, well, they're being raised by kind of a Gen X boomer combo. It's like either or. I think it's debatable, but as far as our own experiences, it's like, well, it's very common to have a Gen X or boomer parent, or to have both boomer, both whatever, you know what I'm saying? But a lot of Gen Zers have Gen X parents, and it's like, well, the mothers reproduce themselves in the oldest son. So narcissistic men reproduce them, they project on their oldest daughter, and then the sons get the worst of the, sometimes. And then the women project on the oldest son, and women actually pick more definitive roles within the family. So the oldest son is the golden child, and then women always have a scapegoat. Men might have, everyone's a scapegoat. Except for the golden child, right?
Yeah.
But women actually pick an individual to lump all the abuse on, and then everyone else just gets an equal distribution of neglect or just psychological manipulation and whatnot. But women have much. They just have different roles. But so women project, narcissistic women project on the oldest son. And so that's where we're at now. It's like, well, we were treated like we were going to be the bad guys. But overwhelmingly, it's like, none of the guys I grew up with are narcissists. They were treated like crap.
Yeah.
They were treated like they were going to be the problem. But then most, it's like, well, women have reproduced themselves in their daughters. Sabotage, it's sabotage, but they've reproduced themselves in the daughters, but then also enabled the golden child.
Right.
And it's like women are always looking for that golden boy, not realizing they were actually just as much preferred in many degrees, or if you say, well, they're not, okay, that's fine. You can argue that you're not, but they've still reproduced narcissistic traits in you in the abuse. So you can be scapegoated and then still become a narcissist because the narcissist still has control over your life, and you've just adopted their. I've seen it happen.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, well, in that setting, what typically happens is you might have like a histrionic or a BPD component to your narcissism, which makes you even worse than the narcissist. Because there's elements. Your emotions are far outside of your own purview of control now. Whereas a narcissist can maintain good control when they need to. You can't. And I've seen this. I've actually seen it happen. Lived it, so to speak.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, well, so it's not that if the mom's a narcissist, it's not like the daughters get away scot-free. It's like, well, whether there's abuse or preference there, there's always going to be sabotage. Narcissistic mothers sabotage their daughters, whether or not they have a golden boy. So if the golden boy is a boy, it's usually going to be a male. But that does not mean, just because the daughters are mistreated, that they're not going to reproduce those narcissistic traits in them. And the same for the dads, on the boys. Just because the men are mistreated does not mean they won't have narcissistic tendencies. But it is quite a bit different, because if you grow up with a narcissistic father, you're going to be hyper competitive, angry, bitter. You're just gonna be angry. Right. You're gonna be like, well, that's life. Get over it. And that doesn't make you a narcissist. And you might even like shut some of that stuff down and be not what he is. Right. Because that's kind of how male abuse is more overt. It's easier to pin down. Whereas female abuse is much, much more difficult.
Right.
It's true. To notice. It's much more difficult to work through, and it's much more damaging in the long term. Not immediately, but in the long term, it's significantly more damaging to a person's emotional and psychological well-being, which is just so happens to be overwhelmingly what we deal with today is mental, emotional well-being. You know what I mean? Right. It's like, well, we're not dealing with male abuse.
That's funny.
That's interesting. If we were dealing with male abuse, everyone would be angry and upset and disenfranchised overtly. But we're dealing with a lot of feminine abuse in society in general. It's a broad brush, right?
Yeah.
Plenty of exceptions, but it's a broad brush. As a society, we're dealing with mental and emotional manipulation, right? And narrative control. And I'm like, well, it's any narcissist can do that, male or female. I think when I was a kid, it's common for grandmothers to always be that like matriarch, that rock. You know what I mean? And as we've gotten older, that's not the case anymore. So something major happened, but we're not looking at patriarchs either. We're not looking at men either. But like, there seems to be no rock for the family to be founded on. Right. And without that central female figure with character. Right. You completely lose the family, any family dynamic that's not built on a lie. Truthfully, I mean, because the family needs a matriarch or a patriarch with character, and if you don't have that, you have a dysfunctional structure that may function, but it only functions under a lie, under a pretense. Right. And for the select benefit of a few. And that's not ever admitted. It's like, oh, well, everyone benefits. No, it's like
unspoken contract.
Yes. Unspoken rules.
That everyone has come to terms with. We have to act this way. We can't say this.
It's just what we do.
And that's how we maintain relationship. Right. But family's important. Right. The relationship's more important than what the relationship actually is. Yeah.
We all put up with it.
Yeah, the surface. Yeah. The surface relationship is more important than the underneath. Yeah. And as long as this is okay, then this must be fine. Yeah, essentially. And it's heartbreaking because, whether it doesn't matter if you have a central father figure, central mother figure, they have to have character. And if they don't,
just the family doesn't last, or it's not effective for everybody,
right?
Yeah. Definitely not for everyone involved, but yeah, it's so devastating. But really, the family culture is devastated, and that is what gives rise to narcissism.
Right. Yeah, and that makes sense.
And so the narcissistic epidemic is simple. It's a simple numbers, like they're just cloning themselves. Women are cloning themselves and their daughters, and they're creating narcissistic golden boys. And then, but it started, I'm not saying it started with women, it started with boomers, and and I'm not suggesting that the boomer women were preferred. They weren't. You know what I'm saying? That's not what history has, know what I mean? That's not what you find. That's not what you find. And not say that all boomers are bad. I'm definitely not saying that, But,
right.
I have great respect for their talent and accomplishments.
I think we're looking at like the negatives of a generation.
Yeah.
And that's very specific.
Characterizing what we.
There must be positives as well.
I'm sure.
There have to be.
Yeah.
And then just having elders, especially a reasonable elder.
Yeah.
Like if you just find a reasonable, not perfect.
Yeah. Not perfect.
There's a lot to pull from.
Yes.
In that, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing that's interesting is that if you go back before boomers. What I see a lot is adultery, a lot of adultery, and like it's very well. I mean, the boomers were kind of a swinger generation, so like it's just assumed that if you're in hippie culture, you're swinging with everybody.
Right.
Kind of more of an open marriage before open marriage was a term.
Yeah, right? The hippies, holy cow.
And but if you go back farther, a generation or two before that, you see a lot of men cheat, or a lot of women going after married men, and those married men leaving with this strange woman, completely abandoning the family to suffer in abject poverty. And I see that a lot. You see that a lot. I mean, there's so many, and that also is a problem, right? Because it's like, well, that's why the court system is oriented the way that it is. And so it's like, okay, well, we don't want to see these women with 6 and 7 kids abandoned to abject poverty. And a lot of the judges alive today may have grown up in that. Because, and I'm not saying that's the case, but a lot of them know people who did grow up there, and now they have position, and now they're not going to let that happen anymore. And it's like, well, I totally get it. Society's a lot different than that today. You know what I mean? And so it's like, well, now we see men who are not allowed to see their kids and have to pay all this child support, and we have no fathers, like, don't really have any rights.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's a huge. We actually have to deal with that, and I've dissected that a lot, because I'm like, I've been paying for the sins of my grandfathers and my great grandfathers my whole life. You know what I mean? Yeah. Well, essentially, as a generation, we have. It's like, but I'm not like that.
Right. Yeah.
I've never been like that. You know what I mean? It's like, so we've never been like that. But at the same time, the law is ready to you know what I mean, to bring the hammer down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And make sure that doesn't happen again. Now, it's just an unintended consequence, but also what is an unintended consequence of those actions. So what those men did by abandoning their families, so unbiblical.
Right. Yeah.
Totally void of I mean, it's against the Bible. The Bible says, do not, you are worse than an infidel if you do that.
Right. It does say that.
It says that.
It does say that.
So it's like, okay, because they did that, and how can you not look up to your mom working so hard to barely making it? I mean, how can you not? Like, she's a victim. She's a terrible victim of this adultery, and she has no feasible way out financially. You know what I mean?
Right.
And no way to make it right again, and she's left with all these kiddos. And it's like, well, that's awful. Not to say she was perfect before, but it's like, well, it doesn't matter. That was wrong to do. You know what I mean? It's like, well, economically, that's a terrible sentence to cast on somebody.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I understand it only because if a person, not because that situation happens to us, but some people do have disabilities where it's impossible for them to work and provide for themselves.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, well, what a terrible sentence. You can't provide for yourself. And I'm like, I can imagine it. And it's like, you do not have the capacity to make a living for yourself. I'm like, well, that's awful in a modern society. You know?
Yeah, terrible.
What a terrible consequence. What a terrible sentence to pass on somebody. And it's not unlike in the Bible where Cain and Abel. It's the same thing. So Cain kills Abel, and God says, you can't work the ground anymore. The ground won't yield. But that's the same thing. What he's doing is he's saying you will never grow. The ground will not yield for you. People don't realize that. I kind of skip over it. I'm like, he spilled human blood. The ground never forgave him.
That's crazy.
Like the earth never forgave Cain.
Wow.
Because he killed his brother. And I'm like, you spill his blood, and the earth is like, dude, I'm not giving you food. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I'm not saying it's an unjust punishment for him.
Right.
I'm not saying that. But for the average person who didn't do something like that, it's like, well, you can't, the ground won't yield for you. The system won't pay you. You can't provide food for yourself. You can't. I'm like, that's what a terrible sentence. You know?
Right. Yeah.
And especially when it's nothing you did.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, well, that's a terrible thing to do. But I don't know why. You know, I can only go back that far. I don't know why these women were obsessed with married men, and I don't know why the married men listened to them. But there's so many. I don't know why they did that, and I definitely don't know why they did it to the extreme. Because the women had no legal recourse. Like the women can't take them to court. The courts will just, well, whatever. He left, so what?
Right.
It's like, well, I don't have food. Okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the courts back then didn't care. The courts now do.
Mm-hmm.
But now